This week, we'll talk about our top 5 hardest games that we've played during our lifetime. We're going to follow that up in the change up with a conversation about another NES classic, Super Dodgeball. And immediately after that, we're going to be brushing back the question of whether or not video games are bad for kids. My question to you, people, video games are bad for kids? And then finally, in the bottom of the ninth, we'll be talking about what I can only assume is going to be the first in a series of discussions about competitive ethics. Today we'll be talking about exploits and campers and how they use exploits and whether or not it's cool and whether or not everybody is just cool with everything that's going on in that scenario. All that and more coming up in 3, 2, 1. Roll the intro, Mom. All right, everybody out there, welcome to the show. Console Control, where two old heads who play video games talk about video games and whatever else we might feel like kicking around. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever and whenever you are. I am your co-host, Krax, and I am joined, as always, by also your co-host, Tim.
What's up, everybody? All my gamers say, hey.
Hey.
All my gamers say, ho.
Oh. That's as far as that's going?
That's as far as that's going.
We could have taken that on the road, man. That could have been the start of something beautiful.
You know.
Alas, it was not to be. Just like those dudes from that skit in Saturday Night Live. Remember those guys? You know who I'm talking about, right? I think it was Adam Sandler and Tim Meadows, and there was a third guy. I don't remember who the third guy was. And they were like these rappers cutting an album, and they were like, everybody say, hey, peace, we out of here. And that was like how they ended every song.
I do remember that,
Yeah. So I guess really it's already been done. It's a good thing we cut our career short when we did.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we got in front of that. It could have been a real litigation nightmare.
Speaking of which, peace, we out of here. Episode
Peace,
4
we out of
is
here.
our
That's
wrap.
this week's show, everybody. Thanks for showing up. We'll see you next week. It has been a week. As discussed, I got into Disco Elysium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you told me last week that was like out and available. I was like, oh man, I didn't know that. And sure enough, true to my word, the moment we got done shooting last week's show, I got on PlayStation Network, got Disco Elysium, and started playing it immediately. I'm gonna level with you. I don't think you'll like it.
Yeah, I was concerned. Concerned.
I don't think you'll like it. Like it's the closest thing to an old school. I mean, I don't want to say tedious, but you know, sometimes they can be like one of those old pen and paper RPGs. This is the closest thing I've seen to like a pen and paper RPG on the screen like ever. Now that said, I get the hype. I really do. Like I love it. You know, I have no problem with the pace. I like that pen and paper stuff. But it is I'll tell you, man, it is a slow cooker. Slow cooker. Like
Yeah.
I'm probably like 6 to 8 hours in, I think.
Wow.
And there's a lot going, like, it's super interesting. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but like, there's a lot going on about like, I don't know, like economic ideology, like the battle between like communism and capitalism, and like there's all that stuff kind of just being talked about. There's a lot being. I don't want to oversimplify because this is not a simple thing, but like that's the kind of thing that you're going to run into in that game. And yeah, I mean, I obviously can't deliver a final verdict because, like I said, I'm only like 6 to 8 hours in, maybe even not 6. I'm not very far through it because I've had a really busy week, but. It's definitely very, very good. It does have it does do something that I've never seen a video game do, which is always a good thing. And it does it really, 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 really well. So I get what the hype is about. It's this really cool situation where like this dude wakes up with a real bad case of amnesia. The really interesting part about that to me is that it puts the character in the game and the player of the game in the exact same position, right? So like anytime you've ever fired up a game, you're basically you basically have amnesia insofar as the world of that game is concerned. You don't know anything. You know, that's why tutorials exist. Like you're coming in cold. You don't know. And so you have to have all this stuff explained to you. Like, this is how this works. This is how this works. This is what's going on in the world. This is who this character is that you're playing. Disco Elysium, like, there's none of that hand holding, and like there's nothing that even resembles a tutorial. So I mean, forget about that. It's just, yeah, this guy's woken up with amnesia. Guess what? You have that same amnesia. Good luck. Go get him, slugger. And so it is really cool how like you are kind of putting things together at the same time in the same way that this dude is just trying to put his mind back together. And it's really, really good how they got that done. My favorite part of the game is the like the skill system that they have. First of all, the skills are totally unique. You've never seen these anywhere else. They're all sort of aspects of a personality. So, and I'm not going to remember them all off the top of my head, but like, you know, one of them is there's an authority rating, and there's like there's a sneak. They have a different word for it, but it's a sneak rating. But it's like something that incorporates itself into your personality that just makes you more sneaky by nature. So it's not really about like how fluidly the dude moves or how easy it is to see him. It's about just how subtly you can do things as you speak to people. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, really neat. And as these abilities, I hate calling them that because I feel like that's an oversimplification, but like as these abilities get developed, they start asserting themselves more and more in this guy's internal dialogue as he goes through the game. So he has internal dialogue all the time, and it's basically you having this internal dialogue. Again, it's really cool how closely you and the character are paralleled in that way. But as these abilities get developed, these different parts of his personality start to assert themselves more and more over what's happening. And so like in a situation where you're talking to, let's say, somebody who doesn't want to talk, if you have a really high authority rating, that's the part of the guy's personality that you have to sort of navigate through in order to get the result that you're trying to get. And this is not, I have to say, this is not a copy and paste job. These don't all ultimately wind up doing the same thing. There is a vast system of branches in this thing that I can already witness, like not even 6 hours in, I've already witnessed how drastically having access to one part of his personality and not having access to another, how drastically that can impact what's happening. I mean, that game is great, and I am really excited to get through the rest of it. But yeah, for anybody watching this, like if you don't like slow paced stuff, yeah, you gotta kind of stay away from this. It has a lot to say. You spend a lot of time having conversations and like just kind of listening to people, talking to people. So it's not really a fast mover. There's no, at least not so far, there hasn't been anything that I would call action in it. But you know me, I got no problem at all with that. And I so far, in the short time I've had with it, I have loved that game. So
I'd say so. If you're 6 to 8 hours in, just the first week, it's like, well, that's pretty much all your spare time.
That's pretty much what it was. Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew in the back of my mind, I knew we had talked about it last week, and in the back of my mind, I kind of knew I wanted to have something ready to talk about this week as far as that game goes.
Well,
because
it's research, man. You were like,
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, hon, can't cut the grass. I got some research to do.
Yeah. She's cool. She understands. Yeah, she gets it.
Love it.
Yep.
Yeah, man. My week, unfortunately, I didn't get time to pick up the controller at all. I actually got back to getting in shape, lifting weights. You know, now that I'm a professional TV personality, you know, a celebrity of sorts, I figured, you know, I may as well look the part, you know, get my Chris Hemsworth on, you know.
Right.
But yeah, unfortunately, that took up the majority of my free time this week, and didn't pick up the controller at all. As you can see, this puny little arm, I got a lot of work to do.
I think over the long term, you may wind up being glad you made those decisions.
Yeah.
Sometimes duty calls, man.
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes
life exists. Life is still out there, whether we have a controller in our hands or not. After all, could be for the best. So that's been the week. That's been my week. That's been Den's week. Let's bring him the heat. All right, so you all know what it is. Top 5 hardest games. Now, before we get into this, I think we should probably talk a little bit about how we define that, because I got to thinking about it, and I just real quick, I decided to throw out anything that was like sort of broken, like games that like didn't really work. I think there's a lot of games that have a reputation for being hard, but ultimately it's because they just kind of didn't work. Especially like with the older stuff, like the 2-bit stuff, the 8-bit stuff. Some of those are like legendarily hard, but that's because they didn't work. It's because they're like literally impossible. So I threw out all that. That wasn't under consideration. And also I disregarded like the maximum difficulty setting, because that's just too much to sort out. Like, we can talk forever and a day about which game is harder than which on the highest difficulty setting, but like, and honestly, there's only been a few games in my life I've even played for any significant amount of time on the hardest difficulty setting. So I don't really know how productive that conversation would be from my perspective anyway. So basically, I chose games based on just their default setting, and how much trouble they gave me, in the default setting. So that's how I approach this.
One thing, I did the same thing. I used both those measures for on how difficult a game was, and then the other one that I used was like The Witness is a good example. So like, nor you nor I have 100% of that game, but I don't think anyone in the world has. Now, is that
Right.
because that game is so hard? Yeah, but it's because there's puzzles and codes that you have to
Yeah.
figure out, and like, so I didn't include any kind of stuff like that just had hidden things that you may or may not know about,
Hmm.
hidden things that are unknown and are only
Yeah.
speculated about. So
Right.
I
Right.
didn't
I
include
also
any kind
didn't.
of crazy puzzle games like that.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, man. I just had this thought, and it had to exit my mouth immediately. Apparently, I also threw out anything that had to do with like just grinding. So like,
Yeah.
if
Oh
something was
yeah.
just extremely hard to grind out, that's not difficult. That's just kind of a time sink, and that's not the same thing. So
Oh yeah, like very first thing that came to my mind when it was top 5 hardest games, I was like, ah, well, getting a platinum trophy in Grand Theft Auto 4, and I was like, well, it was just doing that uh, Lof Wiederstein Petrovich mission over, and you got 4,000 points each time you did that mission. And in order to get a platinum trophy in GTA 4 online, you needed something like, it was like the equivalent of 400 million points, and
ugh,
you got 4,000 points to do a 4-minute mission, and that was the fastest way to get there. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's just grinding
yeah,
beyond grinding, and like, that's not hard. That's just
right,
stupid, is what
yeah,
that is.
yeah, yeah. All right, so that out of the way, let's bring up number 5, Hoss.
Getting into it, man. My number
Mm-hmm.
5 hardest game of all time. Well, first I gotta throw some honorable mentions out here. This one here is an honorable mention.
Oh, yeah,
Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts, those series, man, those were some tough games. Another honorable mention is, like Fez and The Witness. Like, those are puzzling games. They are hard. Like, they are very hard, but I think the thing that takes them into being extra hard is that puzzle feature that I said, like, I wouldn't include into this list.
mm-hmm.
But that being said, number 5 hardest game of all time is a game called Celeste. This game is ultra hard. I mean, it's a little 2D kind of side scroller that it's from an indie developer where it has the graphics aren't its main focus. The controls are as simple as they come. Like, there's essentially 4 buttons. You got your movement of the character. You've got jump. You've got dash, and you've got grab. And man, good luck. Good luck, because that game takes execution, stick work, timing. They're essential in order to beat this game. It took me like 2 weeks just to get through the story on it. And then if you ever wanted to 100% the game, you have to locate all these strawberries and crystal hearts and B-side cassette tapes. They're not super hard to find. It's just once you find them, you have to just, I mean, you have to do the illest moves to acquire these objects. I mean, you'll see in y- you know, you've seen it in the video posted. Is I mean, it's you got to be fresh beyond fresh.
Yeah.
But it's a damn fun game though, and it has the simplest button scheme, so it's a really easy game to learn, but an impossible game to master.
Yeah, that's the stuff. I've heard some stories about that game. I have not played it myself, but it has a reputation. It has exactly that kind of reputation. So
Yeah, like it's you know, the thing I would say about it is that it's super hard, but it's not to the point where you're like, I'm gonna break my controller, I'm gonna spike this, I'm gonna burn my house down, like
right.
nothing like
Yeah.
that.
That's a difficult balance to walk
It
too. I
is,
think
man.
as a developer is to find that is it like to make it just hard enough where you're frustrated maybe, but not like violently, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Because that is a thing that exists out there. So
So cracks, your number five hardest game of all time.
number five hardest game of all time. From PS3, the PS3 days is Ninja Gaiden Sigma.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The fifth, yeah. Were you expecting, honestly, were you expecting that to be higher on this list? Or did you just forget about it?
No, I was expecting it to be higher on this list.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you why it's not higher in just a minute when I close out this little diatribe about this game. So I think it's a nice parallel to Celeste, it sounds like, because like Celeste, it requires you to, like, the controls aren't super difficult. You know, there's a normal attack, there's a heavy attack, there's a jump, and there's basic movement. It was just like a left stick move kind of thing. So, but you know, the difficulty wasn't in like mastering the controls themselves. The difficulty was in internalizing everything that the dude could do to the point where you were no longer thinking about any of it. And when you were confronted with a challenge, it's the craziest thing. And I haven't experienced anything like it since. Like when you were confronted with a challenge, your hands just kind of did it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a situation where you would recall and you were like, oh yeah, that's this move. I need this move for this. Like no, your hands just already kind of knew, and that was because that game forced you to internalize everything to the point that yeah, you were a well-oiled machine, a finely tuned weapon of destruction by the time you got to the end of that game. The reason that I have this game at number 5 on this list and not higher than that is because I actually finished it, which is not something that I can say about any other game on my list.
Okay.
So, yeah. So that's why it clocks in at number 5 and not higher than that. Like I like that game a lot. I put a lot of time into that game and I got really, really good at it because like I said, it's by necessity. You had to. You were either really, really good at that game or you didn't play it at all. There was no in between. It forced you to be a master or else you just weren't going to get to the finish line. So, but at the end of the day, I did get to the finish line. And so that's coming in at number 5. We're going to move on to number 4 then.
Number 4. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I don't know if you've ever played the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the Nintendo, but I hate this game.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
flat out hate this game.
You're not alone.
It might be because it was the first game that I didn't beat. Like, you know, back in the day, you know, on Nintendo, there weren't trophies, there weren't online play. Like there was one purpose to every game that you got, and it was to see the end of the game. And you know, in a lot of cases, growing up as a kid, you know, I didn't have the expendable income that I have these days. You know, you didn't buy games, so you would often just go to the video store and rent them for the weekend. You know, your parents would rent them for you for the weekend. And you know, a title like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like what kid doesn't want to play Teenage Mutant
Oh,
Ninja
it was
Turtles?
hot. It was never available.
But I don't know what kid doesn't want to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I can tell you which adults don't want to play that game. Right here.
Yeah, yeah, right
Yeah,
here,
I
right here.
absolutely hated that game. The attacks were slow and just kind of all over the place. Um, you know, the it was just brutally difficult. There were just enemies everywhere that attacked up high, they attacked up low, they attacked at diagonals, and you couldn't even attack in a diagonal. You could only attack straight forward, straight down, or straight up. Things would attack from behind you. It was just, ugh. It was
Yeah.
it.
I maintain that that game has, to this day, the most obnoxious underwater level that's ever been
Man,
in a game. You remember that
I
stage
do.
with like the electric kelp and like you had to go
Oh,
defuse those? So like not only were you underwater, which is already, come on, who's not annoyed by an underwater level? Everybody is, right? I'm not by myself there. So not only were you underwater and like you moved kind of weird just because of the way the water was, but you were surrounded by this like electrical kelp that would shock you if you got, I mean, it was unforgiving. Like if you were anywhere,
yeah,
if you were
yeah,
anywhere near it, then you were getting shocked. And the alley, like the area with which you could maneuver through it was extremely tight. Um, and you're maneuvering your way through this stuff while all the while a bomb is ticking down somewhere under the water. You don't know where it is. Nothing's telling you, hey, go, you can find it here. No, you just had to like sort of trial and error your way through it. And again, this is not in the era of checkpoints, kids. Like,
yeah.
if you fail at this,
Started over.
you're starting over. Yeah, and this particular section of the game was a pretty good way through. And yeah, the most obnoxious underwater level I maintain that's ever been in a game. Ugh.
Yeah. So this game, it's not broken. I wouldn't say that it's broken.
Yeah.
It just wasn't very good in my opinion, and that's why I never beat it and have no no ambition to beat it. After playing this game as a kid, I just wanted to turn to a life of crime and become street trash and join the Foot Clan.
Yeah.
Go after
Right.
those damn turtles and their silly little rat. But
And they'd have had it coming.
y'all, they'd have had it because they could only attack in three directions. I got them
Yeah.
beat.
Yeah.
Like they don't want this.
They
But
didn't want it.
that's my number 4.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. My number 4 is going to be controversial because I know there are a ton of people who are, as soon as I say this, a ton of people are going to be like, what do you mean that's difficult? That's not difficult. I beat that game back in the day when I was 5 or whatever. Okay, well, I didn't. Okay, I'm sorry. I never beat this game. And so it's showing up at number 4 on my list, and that is Mike Tyson's Punch Out for the NES. So I don't know like what percentage of people actually did beat that game. I tend to think there are a lot of people who say they did and just didn't. I know you did because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was around for that. But like so that's fine. But I think there's got to be a lot of people who just kind of try to break bad on it because I think it's just generally accepted. I mean, it looks kind of bad because the whole game is about memorizing patterns and movement repetition and just working. You just have to figure out where to work the punches in. And so if you invest enough time in this game, you'll know what the guy's going to do, and like you'll they'll telegraph everything, and then you'll know how to react. All you have to do is sink enough time, and then you'll have it all figured out. I'm sorry, people, I never got it all figured out. Right? Like I climbed all the way to Mike Tyson. I didn't have too much trouble getting to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson himself, however, was what I will call, if I'm allowed a throwback to an earlier episode, are we allowed to do that
yeah.
yet?
Oh, for sure.
If I'm allowed a throwback to an
Sure.
earlier episode, Mike Tyson was like the Bo Jackson of boxing in this Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and the developers of that game clearly knew it. You couldn't take a punch. If Mike Tyson got you, you were KO'd. That's just the way that it was. And he had very short telegraph times and terrifying punching power. And so, knowing what was coming, I'm just a little kid. I'm already a nervous wreck when I get to that fight. And so my reaction speed isn't what it should be anyway. My reaction speed is good, but my reactionary decisions are not necessarily the best. So yeah, I never found success finishing that game. I never succeeded in doing it. I know there are a lot of people who are probably thinking to themselves right now that I'm some kind of bum, and that's fine. I'll wear that. If you finished Mike Tyson's Punch Out, you at home, looking at you at home, fine. I don't believe you, but if you did, you did, and we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, that game was so easy. It didn't even make my top 5 list.
Yeah.
I mean,
There
it's
it is.
such a
There
piece
it
of
is.
cake. No,
Yeah,
I like.
that's how everybody talks about it. I don't accept that. I don't accept that. Playing an honest man's game. I don't want to hear you beat Mike Tyson's Punch Out with your Game Genie. I don't want to hear that. Everybody could have done that. That's nothing. I'm talking about just straight Mike Tyson's punch out, climb the ladder, pay your dues, get in the gym, go run the laps with Doc. You got to do all that. And then you can come back and talk to me about I beat Mike Tyson, because only one person I ever knew who did it, to my knowledge, and that is this guy right here next to me. So, it is what it is. I don't want to, I'm not trying to put anybody down. If you did it, good for you. I'm happy for you. I never did it. And it's just one of those things at this point I would have to see somebody do to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like your analogy to Bo Jackson from Tecmo Bowl and Barry Sanders from Dion's Primetime Football. We talked about that in the last episode. And if you haven't seen the last episode, I suggest you go back and watch it. Like it, subscribe. All right. Carry on.
Smooth. We are getting good. We are getting so good at this.
So this brings me to my number 3 game of all time. I think you and I have just been friends for too long. I think that might be why this show doesn't work, because we just have the same stuff on our list. So
we all know about the same stuff. Yeah.
So this is the same but totally different.
Okay.
Number 3, Ninja Gaiden, NES.
Okay. Yeah.
The original
First
NES.
We're gonna say Karate Champ.
Oh man. So, Ninja Gaiden for the NES. This is the second game that I never beat as a kid. Like, all I remember about that game was there was this stage that had a bunch of difficult jumps to make, and if you fell, you died. If you got hit by the enemies, you died. And there was just enemies everywhere, and you had to like climb these little tiny, your character is this big, and when he jumped, he spun. He was like, he did this weird out of control spin, and you had to land on a platform that was the same size as him, all while things are shooting at you. It was like, oh man. So much like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES, I hate this game too. I think I didn't hate this one for the same reasons that I hated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The reason I hated that one was just it was clunky. Like it wasn't smooth. This game was very smooth. It got rave reviews. Even back in the day, it was on covers of Nintendo Power about how great the game was.
That was the game they played in The Wizard, right?
Yeah, man, it's just so difficult. That's the reason that I hated this game, is this was the first time that I experienced that controller breaking frustration. Was in that stage trying to jump on those little tiny platforms, like, can't stand it.
Yeah.
But like what I would have liked to have done, what I should have done in hindsight looking back, is when I was really frustrated, I should have grabbed a pair of nunchucks and just nunchucked myself in the face and the nads repeatedly, just back and forth until like my parents came in, just saw me bruised and beaten. And then they were just like, this Ninja game's terrible for kids. Pull it off the shelves. Remove it off the shelves. Again, that's another shout out to the last episode. Again, if you haven't seen it, go back, watch it.
You're on fire. Go check it out. He's on fire.
Like and subscribe. So that's my number 3.
It is not lost on me, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we're spending a lot of time on the NES system here for this list. I don't think that's a coincidence. My number 3, we actually talked about it last week a little bit. Contra for me was number 3, because Contra, another game, like, the code is fine, but I never beat it on just the 3 lives that they give you. I don't really want to belabor the point here, because all of the reasons that this game is impossible were pretty much laid out in last week's episode. Go check that out, like and subscribe. So, Contra, just to put it in a nutshell for you, you get 3 lives, you get killed by 1 hit of anything from anywhere for any reason. The perspectives change a lot. So like sometimes it's sort of first person over the shoulder. There were those stages. Sometimes it's a 2D side scroller. Bosses were tough. And it was just a real difficult obstacle course to get through. There was a lot of dodging. I would say it was impossible to do co-op, right? Because you couldn't get 2 people on the same page for the length of time that it took to get through that game. There's no way. But I'm going to leave Contra at that, because like I said, I don't want to, much like I did with like The Witness in week 1, and then I kind of talked about it again in week 2. I'm not going to beat it to death, because we kind of already talked about it last week. But Contra's number 3 for all the reasons above.
Yeah, man. Doing that game co-op my brother and I did it, and that one stage, just like Ninja Gaiden, you had to jump up this waterfall.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother would just dust me. He would just leave me in the dust, and I would die. And every time I died, he would just dead arm me, just deck me right in the arm, and I'd be like, man, like I'm trying, like don't leave me in the dust.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
get with the program.
Little teamwork here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
weren't that smooth yet.
yeah, brutal. Yeah, that's a good pick. So
Moving on.
number two, Ian's number two game of all time, Mike Tyson's Punch Out on the NES.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that
Yeah.
because I went on the whole little rant a few minutes ago about how everybody says it's easy. I'm glad to hear somebody have the voice of reason here.
Yeah, I mean, Cracks over here, he talks about how, I beat the game, but there's information that he left out. He left out that I probably faced Mike Tyson about 100,000 times before I finally got him. And I mean, the dude's no joke, man. Like, if you've played it, If you haven't played it, what you don't know is any punch that he hits you with puts you down. You can only get knocked down 3 times in a round and you're done. TKO. And I mean, he has so many different attacks. Each round he has different attacks. Like the whole game is basically like one boss fight to another boss fight. Like if you've played video games, like even Glass Joe is a boss fight of sorts. He's very easy, but every fight is a boss fight, and they all have their tells. Like a lot of guys, they would like spin their fists, and then you knew the punch was coming. So after he spin the fist, you knew like hit him in the face. All kinds of Mike Tyson. There was no tells. It was here comes an uppercut.
Punches,
here comes an uppercut. Here comes an uppercut. Here comes an uppercut. Dodge or you're dead.
Yep. Those punches came in hot. Those things came in so hot. Like the jab, like he would circle that jab. He would circle his fist for that jab like once, and then out it came. Yeah. And it was really hard to get around. And then he had that uppercut that I swear came out faster than the jab did.
It really did.
Like it was so fast, and he would just uncork it like without any notice at all. He would just uncork that thing and then uncork another one, and then he would like shuffle a couple steps and then uncork another one. So like there was just not really, everybody else had a rhythm, and I guess maybe Tyson had a rhythm too, but I never figured it out. I mean, I don't know, man. Yeah, like
what
that's
Tyson
just where I got.
Did is Tyson forced you to have a rhythm. Like that was ultimately what he did. Is you needed to be like duck, 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 round over. Yes, I lived through the first round. Yeah. Like I can't count the number of times that Mario counted me out. Like KO, TKO.
I think what you mean is wow, wow, wow.
Wow, wow. KO, TKO over and over. Yeah, so that's my number 2. Same as Cracks' number 4.
Nice. Well, obviously I support the pick. My number 2, keeping to the NES. We're on a hot streak. We're gonna keep riding it. Ready for this? I bet you're not. Bad Dudes.
Ooh, man.
I start to laugh whenever I even think about the game Bad Dudes, just because it's called Bad Dudes. And I was so into that as a kid, man. I thought that was just the hottest fire that there had ever been. I played that game so much, and it was very difficult. I never finished it because it was very, very challenging. I think what made that game so challenging, I mean, it was a lot. It had a lot in common with Contra, honestly. The key differences being, like, it played the same, but the key differences were you had an actual health bar. So, like, it wasn't just one hit and you were dead. Like, guys did have to work on you a little bit before you died. And the other thing is, on the flip side of that, is that the enemies in Bad Dudes could take so much more punishment than the dudes in Contra could. And the worst part of all that is that in Bad Dudes, you didn't have guns, so like any attacks you did on anybody, you were right on them. And so like a lot of times what happened was there was just an exchange of damage. Like you'd be hitting the dude and the dude would be hitting you. The problem was there was only one of you and 500,000 of the dudes, and so like you would just get worn down much faster than you could stand to get worn down if you wanted to finish the game. Also worth noting is that you couldn't, like, you would do damage, you would punch guys, but there was no interrupt. Like, you would punch dudes, especially bosses, you would punch them and do damage, but like that didn't affect anything that they actually did. So, you know, again, it just came back to that exchange of damage that you just didn't have the resources to pay to pay that bill. And I did kind of tap out on that game and get through that game with my Game Genie back in the day, and just kind of out of the principle, I just want to see the end of the game. I played it so much, I was like, I deserve to see the end of this game, so I Game Genied it up and got through the end that way. But yeah, like without that futuristic assistance, without that cutting edge technology, yeah, I didn't stand a chance. I think I got like level 3, level 4, I forget how many levels there were, but there were a lot more than 3 or 4 levels in that game, and that's as far as I ever made it, because yeah, you just took too much damage. You didn't have a way to avoid. There was no way to avoid damage. That's what I'm getting at. Like, you had plenty of ways to deal it, but no way to avoid it.
Yeah,
it's very hard.
That was it. Is you didn't want to go toe to toe with anybody in that game, yet you had to go toe to toe with everybody in that game.
Yeah. That was exactly the situation. That's my number 2.
Yeah, that's a good pick, man. That game was just epically hard. Well, you may see. Go ahead.
I think it's going to be the same game.
It might be.
I think we're going to have the same game at number 1.
There's clearly a theme to this show, and it is all these games are off to the original Nintendo, and this one is no different. My number 1 is Battletoads.
Let's put them together. My number 1 is Battletoads. Battletoads, ladies and gentlemen, is the winner. Let's do this. Here's what I have to say about Battletoads, right? And look, admittedly, I don't remember a lot about that game. I remember, I have vivid memories of like a few particular levels. And what I remember about that game is like that really difficult, like the opening of it, the very beginning was not so bad, but then there was a level where you have to rappel down some kind of shaft that was super hard, and then you hit this level where they're riding like speeder bikes or jet skis or whatever they were that they were riding, and at that point the game demanded that you be clairvoyant. And if you were not clairvoyant, then you were not getting through that level. And it was a real gut punch.
That was exactly it. Is that level in particular? So if you're playing co-op, the rappelling level was very difficult because you could hurt one another, and like when you were trying to attack, if you did the wrong attack and you hit your teammate, you would essentially like knock him off his rappel and he would die. The jet ski, speeder bike level, whatever it was, like you couldn't hurt one another. But the thing is you had to be clairvoyant. Like you had to know where the obstacles were coming from, because there was no time to just read and react. And oh man, and as soon as you died, you had to go all the way back to start and get there. And I think the speeder bike level, like, it would have been cool if like the speeder bike level was level 2 and the rappel level was level 3, which I do think the rappelling level was level 3, but the speeder bike level was like level 5 or something. And like, it was just so demoralizing to lose at the speeder bikes because you didn't know the obstacle that was coming, and then go all the way back to start and work your way there. Like, I never beat Battletoads. I never did.
Who did?
Yeah, it's another game just added to the list of games that I didn't beat back in the day. And the difference between Battletoads and is why this is number 1 on my list is like, I wanted to beat it so bad. Like, there were so many times that I went back that I'd die at the speeder bike level, go back, try it again, die at the speeder bike level, go. I even made it past the speeder bike level, and like still just didn't beat it. And like,
the hits just kept on coming.
Yeah, like, but I could only count the times I made it past the speeder bike level on really like 2 fingers. I think maybe 2 times. It was
Yeah. It was tough. It was tough, and if I may say so, a worthy entry for number 1 on top 5 hardest games of all time, because I don't think I know anybody who's finished it. And like, over the years, you can see what the ends of games look like because YouTube is a thing, and so like somewhere in the world somebody has done it. But I've never seen the end of Battletoads. You know, to my knowledge, I don't know if anybody has seen the end of Battletoads.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I'd like to give it another try now that I'm an adult to see if
That
I
makes
can
one of us.
get through it because like I said, I still really want to see the end of that game. Um, but more than likely I'll play it twice, get owned by the speeder bikes, and be like, yeah, this is dumb.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, you're lucky to get to the speeder bikes. Who are you kidding?
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Very lucky,
Good
very
point.
lucky.
Yeah, nice pick, man. Good number one.
Yeah, yep. Clearly, it was meant to be, and that's the heat coming at you, folks. What we're going to do now is we're going to head straight into the changeup. We're going to throw a changeup. Here comes the changeup. Can you
Ooh,
hit it?
throwing a change up by switching to the change up.
Indeed. Today's topic, another classic. It's just an NES kind of day, I guess. Super Dodgeball. What do you remember about Super Dodgeball?
Oh man, I that's one of those games that I still play to this day. The Nintendo Switch, when you sign up for Switch Online, they give you those regular Nintendo games, they give you those Super Nintendo games, and when Super Dodgeball showed up as one of those Nintendo games, I was so happy, man. I just love going into the playground and
Oh
just
yeah,
just picking Sam and
yeah. Where was that like free for all, and there was just a bunch
oh
of
man,
dudes just like running around this flat. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so
Right.
good. Just
Yeah,
owning
that
all
was
those
good.
punks, man.
Was Sam the guy? Which guy was the guy that like turned the thing into a football and then just like threw a
Sam.
bullet? Oh, that was Sam.
Sam.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
that was the dude I like to use too. I also like the dude who would like throw it to the moon
Oh,
and then
Bill.
it would come down on top of somebody's head.
Yeah, that
That
was
was very
Bill.
difficult to catch.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that game, for those of you that haven't played it, it's on you have Nintendo Switch Online, give it a whirl. There was two different game modes. There was like the tournament style, which actually had a court where you couldn't cross the line on the court. It was more of a traditional dodgeball, if there is such a thing. And then there was the free for all, like the playground version of dodgeball, where there's one ball and just don't get like everybody had their own like life meter, and you just couldn't get stung by the ball enough times. And that game's such a fun game to play.
Yeah.
You could play two players against each other with I think there was four. It would have been two players and then four bots, I think. And man, it's just so much fun running around trying to catch that ball, getting the timing just right. It's a blast of a game.
Yeah. Anybody out there with a Switch? I would say this is my recommendation of the day. If you have a Switch, Super Dodgeball was a lot of fun, and it feels like one of those games that would still kind of hold up really well to today. Like not because like the technology is there or anything, but because the game works. Like the way it was supposed to work, which is not something you can say about a lot of games from back then. Like they hadn't really figured out the whole. Difficulty balance slash broken moves or broken characters. They hadn't really figured all that out yet back in the 80s. And but Super Dodgeball didn't really have that problem. Like Super Dodgeball, everything works the way it was supposed to work, at least to my recollection. I guess you would know better than me if you played it.
It actually works better nowadays because the D-pads are far more responsive on today's controllers than that stiff D-pad from back in the day.
Yeah. Then the little rectangle that we all had back in the day.
They would just burn your thumbs up. Your thumbs would just be like have blisters on them and be all messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah. So, quick little change-off recommendation for all you out there with a Switch, or I don't know. Is that something that Steam would have? I don't have Steam. It seems like Steam has everything though.
It actually showed up on the PlayStation Store a few years back.
No way.
Yeah. I think they called it Arcade Classics. It was a little bit different, but it still had the same playground mode and tournament mode.
Yeah. Well, say no more. That'll do it. Guess what? It's trouble if you crowd the plate. Here comes the brush back.
Brush 'em back.
So, it's a simple question. It's a question that comes up every now and then. Seems like, I don't know, it seems like it comes up all the time. it's a yes or no question. Are video games bad for kids?
Definitely. Definitely so.
Definitely, yeah.
Kids
Yeah. I
definitely
was pretty
shouldn't
sure
be
I knew
playing
which side of the fence you came down on that
Kids shouldn't
issue.
even be watching the show. Hey, if you're watching the show and you're under the age of 18, like and subscribe, and then don't watch the show.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. No, I'm kidding. It's something that I wanted to talk about just because it was a thing when I was a kid, and you still hear it today is parents cutting down on their kids' screen time. Like, I understand that you don't want them in front of the screen for their eyes' sake, but I think that video games get an extremely bad rap because, like, I think that the parents of the kids that say that, like, no, too much screen time, like, get off the thing, get outside and play. That's something we heard all the time as kids, get outside and play. But I don't know what today's kids, I don't know what parents tell today's kids, except I gotta monitor his screen time. He has too much
Yeah.
screen time. I just don't think that they understand how much video games build their like problem solving and their like cognitive skills. Like you have to remember a lot of things first and foremost. It's I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
what's your take on it?
Well, when we figured out when we kind of settled on this to kick around today for the brushback, I tried really hard to think of an instance of like some instance in my life when playing a video game, literally any video game, turned out to be a bad thing, or it had like a tangible negative impact on my life, and I didn't come up with anything. And I tried. I really tried, just for the sake of playing the devil's advocate, and maybe add something useful or productive to this conversation. I tried really hard to think of like some situation where, I don't know, like maybe even you get done playing Final Fantasy VII and the whole world ends. Like, well, spoiler alert, the whole world ends in Final Fantasy VII, and like nature just kind of takes over and all the people go away. At the time, I thought that was awesome, but I thought about that specifically, and I was like, was that something like, did that put me in a bad mood? Did that make me a pessimist? Like, did that make me just like this little nihilist kid that thought there was no point to anything because we're all going to be gone? No, I really don't feel like that was the case. I think that, among other things, I think video games are a way, way underrated artistic medium. And it's really difficult for me to think about what video games did to me because of all the things I know that they've done for me. A good example, is right behind me. I have on my background here. It's for anyone interested, that happens to be a Yoji Shinkawa, by the way. That's a Yoji Shinkawa a piece of art of my dear friends Solid Snake, and well, really technically that's Naked Snake, and the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3. I've talked at length over the years, and even really on this show already, about the impact that series, Metal Gear Solid, had on me. That series changed everything for me. Like that has such a huge impact on who I wound up being and how I perceive things even to this day. It was way ahead of its time. The themes it tackled were ahead of its time. And if it were up to me, don't ever put me in charge, people, because if it were up to me, this playing through that game series is going to be part of your public school curriculum. Like that's 10th grade. No lie. Like to me, it's that important. Just knowing the effect that it had on me. And I just think it did a really great job of demonstrating to me how subjective everything is. Like it does a really good job of pointing out how much of a mistake it is to be so sure of yourself that you stop questioning the things that you already think you know. And because that leads to, people are fighting people and bombs are getting dropped for incredibly bad and ill thought out reasons. And the real world implications of that thinking, if more people would just stop a minute and think about exactly that kind of thing, I feel like I feel like maybe we would live in just a generally less aggressive world. I don't really mean that on the scale of like global war necessarily, because that's, you know, that's a complex issue. That's about a lot of things, resources, whatever. But just to have in the back of your mind that you never really know what someone else is going through. Everybody is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And I think if that were in the backs of all our minds, I think generally as a society, we would be more inclined to give people a break, man. You know, like when somebody does something that really ticks us off, you know, we get cut off on the road. You know, if you're one of those people that experiences road rage and somebody cuts you off, in the back of my mind, that's the first thing that gets triggered is that, like, you know, that I don't know what kind of day that guy's having. Like, I don't know if he's rushing somebody to the hospital, and I'm not going to flip him the bird just because I feel like he's wronged me in some way. Like, chill out, man. It's going to be all right. And no lie, that internalized thinking that I experience in those situations these days comes from Metal Gear Solid. And that is just one of many, many, many ways that game has impacted my life. And so I really take exception with the idea, I should say, that video games are not a useful investment of time. Now, I have to qualify that a little bit because obviously it does, like anything else, it does depend on what you're playing.
Oh,
For sure, there's garbage out there. There's garbage on TV. There's garbage movies that get made. There's garbage video games that get made. There's garbage books that get written, and that's what I feel like people don't really acknowledge enough. People tend to think that, oh, you know, she's reading a book. She's a smart kid. She's reading. He's reading a book. He'll be fine. Like, reading a book is somehow inherently this intelligent, quote unquote, intelligent thing to do. And no, it depends on what you're reading. It depends on what you read, what you watch. It depends on what you surround yourself with. And that's true of any medium. And for that reason, I have pretty much for my whole life felt like video games were just as valid an art medium as any other art medium, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's absurd, this idea that, you know, that kids need to get outside. Not that there's anything wrong with going outside and playing, you know, Lord knows that's a great thing to do. That's fine. I encourage that, absolutely. But to tell kids to do it just to do it because that's what your parents told you and that's what your parents told them, like that's stale thinking to me.
Yeah.
And you know, going back to Metal Gear Solid, that's exactly the kind of thinking that I learned to just kind of not engage in. So it's had a huge impact on my life, and that's not the only series. There have been so many games over the course of my life that have impacted me in a huge way, and so yeah, I think that whole discussion to me is absurd.
Yeah, I agree. Like the, you know, to add to another valid point of positivity in video games is these lists that we just did. Is we talked about these epically hard games that we were playing at a really young age, and like something that it taught us is perseverance. You know, like these games were so epically hard, and like, you know, you wanted to quit, but you needed to see it through to the end, and I think it really taught a valuable lesson there. But you know, to play the devil's advocate a little bit, you know, video games have changed a whole lot since the NES days. You know, NES, you weren't getting online and playing games with 40-year-olds and literally anybody and everybody. You know, it's a scary thing to think that, you know, kids are playing Fortnite these days, and everybody that's playing Fortnite, you know, stoners, potheads, probably even pedophiles, and like, you know, it's a really messed up thing that online community, you know, you're essentially taking your kid and you're putting your kid online with that, and you know, that's a really scary thought. But at the same time, there's games like Minecraft where it's like, oh my goodness, like if I was a kid and like if I had Minecraft when I was a kid, I never would have gone outside. Like I'd have fought my parents to go outside. Like I loved Legos as a kid, and you know, I was always limited to what I could put together because of the Legos that I had. I'm not saying that I grew up poor or nothing like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we ate 2 meals a day. You know, yeah, it might have been SpaghettiOs, but you know, we didn't have a ton of Legos. Like, you know, it was me, my brother, and my sister, and we had to share this bucket that was like this big full of Legos, and like you're only gonna build so much. And you have this game Minecraft that is just, I mean, it's the imagination is it's whatever you want it to be,
Universe of Legos.
yeah, like Roblox is the same kind of thing. Like you create, it's these creation tools that, I mean, 6-year-old, 7-year-old kids are getting a hold of these games. Like, oh man, you're kidding me. Like, you can't tell. Like, those kids are gonna grow up to be, geniuses, architects, engineers, because they have these great building tools at their disposal at such a young age. Now, the ones playing Fortnite, I can't.
Yeah, right.
I can see why parents would be upset about that one. I
Yeah,
really do. Or Call of Duty, or playing any of these games that, kids really shouldn't be playing. Grand
yeah,
Theft Auto,
right, right. Yeah, yeah. I think you make a really good point about how people need to be thinking about what, not necessarily, like, even if you're not thinking about the video game itself, you have to think about the community that's engaging with it and your kids' exposure to that community.
Yeah.
And I think, even though the world looks a lot different today than it did when, in the NES days, I think it still remains true that if you're a parent and you stay engaged with what your kid is doing, I think, like, I don't know. That's something that I think is always going to be true. Like, if you're into what your kid is doing, if you're aware of what your kid is doing, and you are in a position to regulate, for lack of a better word, your kid's exposure to that, then I think the damage can only, it's going to be minimal. Not that I want to be clear. I'm not advocating to go let your kids mess around in that, because I don't think that they should. I don't think kids should even be on the internet. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind a situation where they can be spoken to directly by people who are our age and up to who knows what. But yeah, it's a sticky conversation to have, honestly, because there's it's easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, well, just watch your kids, but I know it's not always that simple. Kids, you remember what we were like when we were kids. Like, people didn't know what we got up to all the time. That's part of being a kid, and that's part of being a parent, frankly. You're not always going to know. So it's not really completely fair of me to sit here and say, like, well, where are the parents at? Like, I get it.
Yeah.
It's not all under your control, and these are legitimate concerns. But I do think, just to kind of put a bow on my point here, I do think that the potential positives to what can be, to what a kid can have access to through video games, outweighs the potential negatives that kid can have access to. That's assuming that there's been some prep work done as far as keeping track of what that kid's exposed to. Like, you do need to put in that, like, groundwork. But yeah, like, the idea that video games by themselves are an immature or inherently somehow bad or just a waste of time, like that I don't agree with even a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think really ultimately the negative that we're talking about is mature games for kids.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, they shouldn't be watching R-rated movies or triple X
Right.
films. Like,
Right,
that's
right.
obvious. And it's
Yeah.
the same kind of thing in these mature games. Like, kids shouldn't be playing them. And then the other thing is their exposure to the internet. Like, we're not necessarily talking about video games when you're talking about playing a multiplayer online game. You're
Right.
talking about people that are on the internet that can change that experience. And, that's really the internet. But I think as a whole, video games are actually great for kids. They can do so much in the way of affecting them in a positive way. But
Yeah, well said. Well, as we all know, everybody comes to the internet specifically to have their minds changed.
yeah,
And
and
now
to
that a
watch the
couple of
show,
randos,
like and subscribe.
yeah. Now that a couple of randos have told you what's what, we'll go ahead and wrap this up with the bottom of the ninth. This is a conversation that I have wanted to have for a long, long time. I am fascinated by the subject of what I call competitive ethics. And I can talk about that all day, every day. It's fascinating to me. And it's something that honestly is really important to me. I like to make sure things are fair. I'm one of those. I'm one of those guys. I like to make sure things are fair. I'm gonna check the rules all the time. That's just the kind of game player that I am, and I have always been. Um, Sometimes situations arise where things that people start to do in a game weren't necessarily intended in the design of the game. My question to you, we're specifically referring to what we call campers right now. My question to you is, how much of a problem is something like camping? And I guess before you answer that, first, define for us, if you will, what you mean by camping in the first place.
Well, what I think campers are is campers are just, if you're playing a competitive game online and there's health somewhere, the person just camps the health and just sits there. So when the health respawns, they immediately pick up the health. So you almost can't kill them because they always have full health. Or if there's, like the golden gun and GoldenEye, camping the golden gun and knowing how to get there first and then camping the thing. Like, all right, the golden gun was a one-shot kill, and if they're just camping the golden gun, you can't get a golden gun of your own because there's only one spot for it. There's other things you can do, like this game Vigor we've been playing. You can just camp and exit, so people can't leave the match without meeting resistance, and you're just hiding there at the exit. But in my opinion, I think that developers just that's an error on their part. Like, they have to know better than that. Like, you've tested this game. There needs to be a way. Like, they actually did it with the health thing. Is a lot of games, if you have 100% health, you can't pick up health because, well, it just makes sense. Like, what do you need more health for if you have 100%? Vigor. There's multiple exits. There's 5, 6 exits. So, if somebody's camping one exit, you just go to a different one. There's ultimately, I think that it's on the developers to know that because, much like our previous topic, if you're playing with people online, they're gonna do the scummiest things. Like, they don't care about the quality of the competition. They don't care about a competitive edge. They will flat cheat if they can flat cheat whatever helps their KDR. Like, and what I've noticed in all my years of playing video games online, like, it's an alarming rate of people that do that kind of stuff. And I want to say it's more than 50%. It's probably 60% of people only care about their stats and their numbers and whether or not they're going to be number one in the world. Oh, I'm just trying to be ninja. And for what I heard, I think Ninja even got in trouble for using like an aim bot or something like that. And it's like, I could be mistaken on that. It might have been a different player, a different Fortnite player other than Ninja. Ninja's the only. I'm not real
high profile guy we know.
Yeah, I'm an old man. I'm not hip. I'm not hip with the kids these days. But,
right.
Aim bots and stuff like that. It's like controller macros, computer macros. It's like, that stuff. It's just, I think it's cheating. I think it's flat out cheating.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what the implication of that is. Like, because to me, what that implies is that people generally care more about how they look than they do about playing the game, which is a super weird thing to think, right? Because you would think ostensibly somebody buys a video game because they think they're going to enjoy playing this video game, but clearly there's a conversation that can be had about what exactly it is that they're going to enjoy, right? You would assume that it's the game itself. But I think we see over and over again that there's a real insecurity with a lot of players who do exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, where they're so preoccupied with, their KDR. They need to look good on the leaderboards for whatever reason, like they're so preoccupied with what they think losing says about them, or maybe more to the point, what they think losing looks like to other people. They don't want other people to see them lose. I think it just speaks to a widespread insecurity, and I don't think that's unique to gamers. I think if I had my way and everybody in the world played video games, I think you'd probably see about the same spread. I think you'd see about the same rate of people just doing awful things, just basically cheating any chance that they get, just because people are insecure. It's more important to them to look good than it is to actually be good. And while that is a travesty, in my opinion, it is just kind of the way it is. On the one hand, I feel like I get super irritated by people who, when people act according to the letter of the law and ignore the spirit of the law. I get super irritated by that. Like, a good example is probably Tom Brady, like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. If people generally know what's going on with them, right? Like they're famous for doing exactly that. Like, you can read the rule book and you can see what the rule book was trying to do. And it should be pointed out as well that it's not possible to write every contingency out in the rules. It's not possible to do that. So at some point, it does come down to competitive ethics. It does come down to how important it is to someone to have a fair game. And what I really can't stand is people who read the letter of the law and then just think about a way that, okay, well, it didn't, okay, so I can do this. Like, they know what they can get away with, and then they get away with it, even though it's very clear that that's not what the law intended, that's not what the rule intended. That drives me insane. At the same time, on the other hand, I have the attitude that if it's possible to do something in a game, for the most part, if the developers, whether through oversight or for whatever other reason, if the developers have left it in there, then you find a way. You find a way to counter it. And I do think that as gamers, it falls on each one of us. We all have a responsibility to not cry about it so much and just try to find ways to deal with it. It might very well be that there is no way to deal with it, and that you definitely have a problem then. Like, you have a design problem, clearly, and that's a different conversation. But it's just two sides of that issue for me that I honestly, I really don't know where I come down on it, because I'm super irritated by the guys who just try to get away with anything that they can. And at the same time, I think it falls on each of us to deal with that in any way that we can. It's unfortunate when sometimes that results in us playing the same way that they play, which means nobody ends up playing the game. Yeah. And that is a bummer. That's broken, and that's a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. Like, that's the positive in today's games, is that, with you being connected online, the developer can update the game and remove some of the exploits or camps or whatever is broken at the time, and they can update it, and you can have that fixed in 1 week. This takes me back. I don't mean to boil your blood here, but it takes me back to WCW Nitro back in the day. You would consistently beat my ass. I'm just going to get up and
go to the other room while you tell the people what's going on here. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and like, this game was so old that, this was before internet connection, so they couldn't update the game. And basically how it worked is if you got pinned, if you could push the buttons fast enough, you could get up. And then each time that you got pinned, it became harder and harder to get up. But if you could push the buttons fast enough, you could get up. So in order to win a wrestling match, you have to pin the opposing player for 3 seconds. Well, old Cracks over here would consistently beat my ass at that game. I mean, he would wear me out. But the thing was, he couldn't pin me because I had the fastest buttons this side of the Pecos. So the game technically was broken because, like, we couldn't play it. Like, what am I supposed to do? Not hit the buttons as fast as I can? Like, how's that?
Right.
How's that my fault? Like,
yeah.
But for him, it's like, for Cracks, you completely understand it because you're like, you haven't even landed a punch yet. Like, like, here I am pinning you for the 15th time, and you haven't even landed a punch. And the match just would go on and on and on, and eventually I would win because after 45 minutes, I've landed 6 punch and pinned him. It's like, I mean, I totally understand, but that's one of those catch-22s where it's like, I mean, what do you do in that circumstance? But luckily in today's era, they can just remedy that with a simple bug fix and update.
It's still out there, but it is definitely less of an issue. What I can say about that is that was the one time I can remember I actually turned into Kane. Like, I was so mad. I was so I don't know that I don't know that I've ever been that mad playing a video game before then or since then. I was hot. I was so hot because I mean it's like the man says, like I was clearly the winner.
No
I was
doubt.
clearly the winner.
No
I'm remembering one match in particular. It went on for like 30 or 45 minutes even.
insane.
Like it was a long, yeah, it was a long match.
Insane.
Just because you weren't pinning me and I could get a pin, but like you the threshold for how fast the button presses required had a ceiling. And so because you were just faster than what that ceiling was, you could never get held down. And I was so mad. Oh, I was mad. Oh, I'm still mad. I'm being honest.
I wasn't the sport that I am today. You know, today I'm like,
Right.
yeah, Dale's whooping my ass. Back then I was like, dude, you can't beat me.
yeah.
You're trash.
Yeah, that
Get
wasn't the
better.
story at the
That's all I
time
can
when we
tell.
were
Get better.
whatever, yeah, 17 or whatever we were. When we were 17 and playing that game or whatever we were, it was just it got thrown in my face. I was heated. Oh, I was heated. Oh, I was heated. I'm still kind of heated. Yeah, different times, man. Simpler times. You were not the sportsman then that you have blossomed into today. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Although my top 5 list was definitely better than yours.
Just agree to disagree. Like and subscribe. I don't even know why you would say that. Honestly, they're so close together.
Yeah, they're the same list.
Yeah, they were very close to the same list. Yep. I mean, Turtles was good. Turtles was a good pull. I thought about Turtles, but because what you don't know is last week we did the top 5 weapons, and I almost included Donatello's bow from that game.
Oh man, that thing.
But I couldn't do it because like the game was so hard. And like, okay, how is this one of the greatest weapons in a video game when you still just got your ass handed to you when you were carrying it around, Yeah. So it didn't make the cut, but it was definitely a very difficult game. Yeah, it's just a tough topic. I don't know where I come out on it, honestly. Like some days I'm this and some days I'm that. And it's just kind of a case by case thing for me with the campers and the rules interpretation and everything like that. It's a tough thing to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, where I end up with it is in today's age, if you can do it, just go ahead and do it because, developers can change the game. They can update the game. Back in the day before games were able to be updated, like you had to like come to a gentleman's agreement. Like, hey, look, this is off limits. You can't go do this. You can't go do that. Like, but.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to leave the skeet shot in the loadout room and not take that into the field if you happen to be playing a Farpoint match.
Yeah, that thing is irritating.
Real irritating. Yep. I mean, it's if I had been, I can promise you this. If at any point I had been thinking about WCW while we were playing Farpoint, there's no way I would have left that thing back in the lodge. No way. I'm coming out with that. I would have told you I was bringing something else and just brought that out anyway. If I'd been thinking, WCW, I turned into Kane. I got 2 feet taller. Oh yeah. I was so mad. Good times.
Still to this day, I don't think I've seen you angrier.
I was real mad. I don't know that I've been angrier, honestly. Yeah, I mean, it mattered so much more back then. You
got a bulging vein right now just talking about it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, things were different. Like I just talked a few minutes ago about how video games, and maybe this kind of brings the whole thing full circle. Like it's because of the video games I played in the time since WCW that I am now able to I can just sort of deal with this. I've had my therapy. We're all older and wiser now. But at the time, man, you just didn't like the way that it looked. Yeah, I hated the way that it looked. That I could just win that match, clearly win that match, but nobody would say it out loud. You know what I mean? Because that wasn't the result of the match, and it burned my ass. Oh, it burned my ass.
Yeah, but I've never lost in that game, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's the stuff. That's the good stuff. Simpler times. Look, like I have to catch my breath. I'm having an episode. I have been triggered, and it's your fault. WCW, I had repressed that in the depths of my subconscious, and now here it is, springing up like a jack in the box I didn't even know was in the room. Forced me to confront my WCW demons all over
Yeah,
again.
I've never been happier that we are streaming at like 100 miles away from each other right now.
For sure. You never know. This day, we're older and tougher now. The brawl just might break out. You never know. I think that does it for us. I believe the only thing left to do is give a shout out to John Bernthal. John, keep up the good work out there, buddy.
We
And on
outta
that
here.
note, that's going to do it for us.
Cue the music.
Cue the music, roll the credits, be safe, be kind, be legendary. We'll see you next week.